Alright, well, I wasn't really planning to do a tier list anytime soon, but, well, recently I was on YouTube, and there's this guy called Drib, and he put out a project tier list. And there's some, projects in here that I thought, he basically sort of, misrepresented as, being great or not that great. Others I feel like, he maybe overvalued and stuff like that. And, I felt like I could probably, do my own tier list. Now, something basically note about this guy who's basically, done this tier list. He is, an insane player. I'm not really into insane difficulty just yet. I'm more in a normal nightmare, but it's worth knowing that basically his experience will be a little bit different from mine just for that that purpose. So keep that in mind. But anyhow, the tier list that this guy basically used was made by a guy called Laxius. So credit to him for this tier list. Let's just get into it. And I'm just going to reset these down here a little bit. All right, so how I basically plan to do this, I'm planning to go in order of strength, dexterity, all these talents like that. So I'm just going to ignore the order down here because just trying to figure out what these basically are from their images isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. So keep that in mind. We also have S, A, B, C, D, F tier for the list up here. So F tier basically stuff that should be removed from the game or reworked substantially. S tier being stuff that should probably be nerfed in some aspects perhaps. But anyhow, let's just get to it, shall we? So, the first one basically on the list is Giant Leap. And you basically saw I had this in A tier to start off with. And let's throw this up here in C tier to I Can Carry the World one as well. But let's just explain Giant Leap here. So, Giant Leap is basically a talent that you basically get after dealing 50k damage with weapons, shields, or fists. It's got a fairly substantial cooldown of 20 turns, but it does have a a fairly sizable amount of utility for what it's basically giving to you. So Giant Leap is basically a rush / teleport type of ability. When you basically use it, you basically can land yourself with precision on a specific tile, and you'll basically damage everything around that tile within a one radius spread of your landing site. Everything that you basically hit in that tile will basically be stunned, dazed, or pinned, and it'll basically take 200% weapon damage. So pretty good. Now, this talent you might think is a very awesome sort of way basically to jump into battle and stuff like that, but it also has a very good utility that you basically use it wherever you want to. So if you want to basically run away from battles, you can use it for that purpose as well. It's usable on the undead, so they who basically lack the movement fusion, so they can use that basically to escape if they want to, and they can also be used on say classes that have mobility problems, if you have those to worry about. So I consider Giant Leap to be one of the better talents basically in this game. It's fairly easy to get. It has good utility if you basically have a character that lacks the utility for movement and stuff like that, or if you're playing undead characters. And yeah, I consider it to be a tier A talent. And I have in C tier the I Can Carry the World talent, or ICCTW. So I Can Carry the World. Another fairly easy to get prerequisite for this talent is basically heavy armor training free. And this one's basically always on, so you always benefit from it. Now, what this basically does, it basically resets your fatigue to 0, gives you increments plus 500, increases your strength by 50, and increases your size category by 1. Now, I've seen people say I Can Carry the World's not that great, and to some extent, I can sort of agree with that because there's other talents that are probably better in most situations, but by itself, it's not a terrible talent for sure. The thing about this talent is that basically it sets your fatigue to 0, and that's where the meat of this project is basically all about. So, for those who don't know, fatigue basically will basically increase the talent cost for some resources. So, if for example you're basically using say hate, you'll basically get increase of say a 21% fatigue, increase of 20% basically in your hate resources and stuff like that. And if you're basically using mana, then it's double. So fatigue is a very big nuisance for some classes in this game, and sometimes you basically want to have no fatigue basically to let your resources basically last a little bit longer. A good example would probably be the Child Blade, for example, because they basically use stamina and mana, and they're basically a burst type of character who doesn't really get their resources back fast enough. So basically having I Can Carry the World and say a Child Blade basically let them burst longer and possibly kill their foe before they run out of gas. So a very powerful talent if you know how to use it. It also has some utility as well of the size category. So if you basically get, for example, you shall be my weapon, then you compare it with this to basically get like, an extra 8% on you can carry my weapon for like, bashing things around. And there's also like, other like, niche utilities of the size area as well for like, other characters in this game you may want to consider. I believe one of the ogre ratios basically makes you bigger, so you can make yourself even bigger for that purpose. And there's also like, say, the dwarven like, Stonewarren talent, Deep Rock, or that's basically the talent category. But one of their like, talents basically in Deep Rock will basically let them like, get like benefits from being like bigger. So yeah, basically you can like make yourself really big in this game if you want to. So I can carry the world. I consider it to be like, a C tier talent because it's not bad for what it basically offers, but it's very niche. So if you have like, say, a Shadow Blade that has like, resource problems, then like, this is a way of sort of mitigating those problems. But you basically have to know like when to use it and when not to use it. So it's sort of the thing right here. All right, Irresistible Sun. So this one requires to basically deal 50k light or fire damage. Sometimes that can be sort of difficult to basically like, obtain, but usually you can basically get this like, easily enough, so it's not too bad. This is basically our active talent that basically has a 25 turn cooldown. And what it basically does, so Irresistible Sun is basically sort of like an aura ability. It basically will like, pull in like, enemies basically in like, a smaller radius around you of like, 5. And it'll basically apply a damage reduction buff to them of 30%. And that's basically great for like mitigating the damage you might take from like, a swarm of enemies. Now, where like Irresistible Sun really shines though is the fact that it does a lot of damage. So you'll basically deal like, lots of strength damage in like, fire, light, and physical. And sometimes the enemies won't be able to resist that. So you'll basically get like a lot of damage to resolve it. Especially if they get pulled in close. Now note that basically like, Drib had basically said that like, Irresistible Sun, it's not like too keen on it because it basically like, pulls enemies towards you, which you may not always like. But the thing is that you may like that as well in some situations. A good example would be like against mages or against other like, enemies that want to be closer to you as opposed to like, far away. Because you don't want to basically have like mages running away from you because you're trying to kill them. So this pulls them in and prevents them from running away. There's also other situations where like, you may want to like basically pull enemies together so you can basically put like, AoEs and stuff like that. So it does have fairly good utility. Also, I'm also playing a Stonewarren right now just to like, sort of test out this prodigy right now for its purposes. And I'll note that basically Stonewarren has this sort of summon ability where you can basically summon like 2 halves, so stone half and crystalline half for your like character. And those like two summons you basically get for the Stonewarren, they basically get the buffs that your character currently has. Maybe basically like summon them. So you can potentially have up to 3 Stonewarrens going on at the same time, basically in an instance. So yeah, there's some broken like situations where you can basically use Irresistible Sun. Now, I'll note that Irresistible Sun is like sort of like I can carry the role in that basically it's not the greatest talent basically in the world, but it does have its purposes if you know how to basically use it. So yeah, it's basically not a bad talent. So let's see here, Irresistible Sun. That's basically right here. Another like C tier talent, probably a little bit less than like I can carry the world, but still a fairly good talent for sure, or prodigy rather. I should just like consider prodigy and talents interchangeable for this video, but you know what I'm basically saying. All right, so Legacy of the Naloren. So this is basically sort of like how can we put this? It's a very like expert type of like prodigy to be sure. It basically requires that you kill one the guy basically sends you off to kill Slazul on like the Maj'Eyal map, and like basically when you basically do that, you'll basically gain access to like the exotic weapons mastery of like your character level times 5. You'll gain like water breathing, so you don't have to worry about that sort of equipment anymore. You get Swift Poison, which is Swift Poison, I guess. This is there for the hell of it, I guess. You also really receive like a very powerful trident like artifact from Slazul. So I'll note that basically like Legacy and Naloren, for those who basically know how to basically make use of like the build up for his prodigy, it can be devastatingly powerful. And you can basically like do a lot of damage with that trident for sure. So it's a very like powerful artifact to like get. The thing is that like to basically get requires you basically to like go to like the second part of the game, and you're basically gonna be like in like the later half of the game basically like get this prodigy. So you're probably gonna already have like your first prodigy point, and then you're like sort of looking. My heads are cut out there for a moment, but anyways, I'll note the Legacy of Naloren. It basically requires that like you get to the Maj'Eyal, which is basically in the late game of like the game. So it's not basically something you can basically immediately get. So you have to save your first prodigy point in order to get it, or you have to basically like wait your second prodigy point to get it as well. It is a very powerful artifact artifact to be sure to basically get, as well as the exotic weapon mastery. Basically you really can't get any other way. If you basically have normal weapon mastery, you can basically float those points basically to get them into more exotic mastery as well, I guess. But it's just one of those talents that this is not a bad thing, but it's very niche, or very champion, so to speak. But when you do get it, it's very powerful for sure. So I'm gonna basically say this is probably also C tier, just for a simple reason that it does require you to basically go all the way over to Maj'Eyal and do the quest in a specific way for Slazul, and you can basically kill Slazul after if you want to, but whatever. It's just it's a fun little thing to basically do. It doesn't really need to be changed. It does what it needs to, and it's pretty powerful when you basically get it for the payoff. So not bad. It's like a C tier prodigy. I would leave it just as it is. Alright, so Massive Blow. So this requires you to dig 3 times and deal 50k damage with just 2-handed weapons. Now, Massive Blow is a very lacking prodigy to say the least. Basically what it does is it basically gives you an extra attack for 150% weapon damage and knocks back stuff. And if the target hits the wall, it'll basically crash through the wall, it'll apply the counter strike effect to them, and it'll do another 50% weapons damage for until 500%. That's pretty powerful, by the way, but it requires that you basically position foes in order to make use of it against walls, and that may not always be the most capable thing for you to basically do. So it can be a little bit hit and miss. It is powerful for sure, but it's basically one of those talents that it could be improved a little bit. Maybe it could smash into other foes, or something else that's give you more options basically for it. So it definitely is one that's could be improved. It's not terrible. It doesn't need to be removed or anything like that, but buffed up for sure a little bit. All right, so we have Pain Enhancement System. So this is earned when you basically achieve the Size Matters achievement, which basically means you hit for 600 damage in a turn, I think. So Size Matters, yeah, did over 600 damage in one attack. So that's fairly easy to basically get if you do a lot of damage, and it would be level 3 in order to get. So on those basically for most prodigies, you have to be level 25 to get your first prodigy point. This one would require you basically hold off to level 30. So either you have to sort of wait for level 30 basically hit, or you have to basically spend another prodigy point and come back to it. It's not a bad thing basically to wait, I guess, in the early game, because you're probably not facing anything too challenging, or you can basically go elsewhere to get level up. But it's worth noting. But anyhow, when you deal a critical hit, your embedded system activates, increasing all your primary stats except strength by 50% of your strength for 6 turns. Now, this is a very powerful ability. You basically have good critical ability, as well as a lot of stats based on your character. So if you're basically playing a Shadow Blade or Arcane Blade, those characters basically have to manage dexterity, magic. They also have to manage cunning. So that's basically for Shadow Blade. And then for the Arcane Blade, they might also want to do those stats as well as strength. So yeah, if you have those characters that have lots of strength, then this is a very powerful way of boosting up their stats to be just better than everything that they want to do. And that's not bad for what it basically does. It's again, it's somewhat niche for some of the characters, but you can make use of it. So not bad. I probably rate it as being a B tier talent. So some of the characters may want to get, some may not. It's perfectly good where it is. So keep it where it is basically. All right, Steamroller. So Steamroller is very similar to Giant Leap, and that's basically a mobility talent, but it doesn't have the sort of properties that Giant Leap does, and letting you basically escape from stuff. It's basically all about rushing to the next flow next. What it basically does is it basically reduces your rush stamina cost by 2, and whenever you basically kill a target within 2 turns of rushing them, you basically get a damage boost, and you reset the damage for your you reset your cooldown for rush, so you basically do it again. Now, if you're able to kill little stuff really quick, rush can be very powerful. And on some characters, it can just let you get massive damage basically built up over time. In the final boss fight, for example, if you let the portal stay open, this can be useful in order to build up your ability to sort of rush here, there, and everywhere. But at the same time, this is also very lacking time as well, because you have to rush towards foes. You're basically always taking damage, so it's like, a little bit lacking in that sort of regard. It is a fun talent to use, but it's also sort of like one of those talents that, like, it could be better, better, I guess, for sure. Maybe it could give you like an armor bonus or something like that, or whatnot. It definitely feels like, it could be better for sure. So that's basically that talent right there. So here's Steamroller. I probably consider it to be like another D tier talent. I mean, yes, you can make some very, like, laughably like powerful builds with it, but I like to have like more utility with my, like, my prodigies. So I mean, Giant Leap, the reason I basically rate it so high is because I can use the escape with, like, an undead character, for example. This would basically always be rushing me into, like, danger. So that's basically, it's like, negative, thinking for it. It is powerful though, so I will give it that. So it's not, entirely terrible to the point that it needs to be, like, removed. It just needs to be, like, maybe buffed a little bit. All right, so Superpower. So I know that Superpower is basically like, the sister prodigy to, like, Arcane. Where is it? Arcane Might. Basically, Superpower doesn't have, like, any sort of like prerequisites, so you can always take it. And it basically, like, will increase your mind power by your strength. So for the Wormer character, other anti-magic characters, stuff like that, this is a very powerful way of, like, being able to, like, sort of like, buff up your ability to, like, do mind damage, I guess we'll say. And you basically also get, like, a 40% willpower damage modifier in all your weapons. So basically, if you have, like, willpower as, like, character, and this, like, really helps out with, like, boosting up your damage output. It's not like the best talent for sure. There's, like, other talents you can probably take as, like, a Wormic or, like, Wilder character or anti-magic, but it's not terrible for what it basically does. So yeah, Superpower, probably an A tier talent right there. That's probably where I throw it. There's better talents. I consider, like, Arcane might be like an S tier talent for sure, but it's not a bad one for what it basically does. So it's simple. You can easily get it. Definitely worth considering. All right, you shall be my weapon, or YSBMY or W. So this requires to be big or larger. So you're either restricted to ogres, or you have to basically get, like, the I can carry the world, like, prodigy first or something like that. But anyhow, what this, like, this one basically does compared to, like, say, like, massive blow, which basically has a similar, like, cooldown, is that it basically gives you, like, a very similar sort of knockback ability. But when you basically, like, attack stuff with, like, your knockback here, you're gonna stun them. So basically everything that's in the path will be like, stunned in the path of knockback. And you also do, like, a lot of extra damage depending on how big your character basically is. So if you have a really, really big, like, ogre, for example, that's basically bashing stuff against, like, other, like, foes, you can do tremendous, like, crowd control basically with it, so to speak. And it can't be used if you're no longer size big or larger, so that's something to basically keep in mind. So you're sort of restricted in when you can use it, but when you basically can use it, it's pretty powerful. Now, I'll note that basically if you're, like, bigger than, like, size big, you basically get extra damage. So you basically, you can basically get up to, say, like, the 500 damage that, like, massive blow basically does if you're, like, 2 sizes bigger than, like, big, I guess. I'm not sure how big you're going to see get in, like, Maj'Eyal. I think you get up to like, large and gargantuan, but yeah, you can basically get some, like, fairly good damage out of, like, YSBMY. So it's certainly good for that purpose. The only thing about it is it requires it requires it to be big. And that may not be achievable in, like, all, like, characters. So it's a bit restricted for that sort of purpose. But for what you basically get out of it, it's basically fine. So overall, I consider Massive Blow to be, like, an easy B tier, prodigy. Definitely want to basically consider if you, like, want to basically get this for some reason. So you get that, and you can do a lot of damage with it for sure. All right, so that's basically all the strength-based prodigy ones. Now we go over to dexterity ones. So, automated reflex system. Have gained a Matrix style achievement with this or any previous character for current affiliate and permanent setting, and be level 30. Let's just look for the Matrix style achievement here. Let's see if it's in here. So Matrix. Oops, it helps if I actually spelled it right. So Matrix style. So you have to finish the whole Basic zone without being hit by a single void blast and Manworm. So basically, that's, like, where you go with, like, the mage starting character, for example, in, like, the Archmage, like, Star Quest for Anglin. You basically just, like, have to go for that first zone without being hit. So not that hard to basically do if you know what you're doing. All right, so this is in our passive, and when a projectile is about to hit you, you gain a free turn. and it can trigger every 5 turns. So this is a very powerful prodigy, because if you basically have lots of projectiles basically coming at you, you can get a whole lot of free turns basically. And you can basically use those free turns basically to, like, you know, do extra stuff, put up a shield, you know, do whatever you basically want to. Basically that means, like, you know, for like every like 5 turns, you'd be able to, like, you know, if your projectiles basically on the screen come at you, you'd be getting like an extra, like, you know, extra turn basically to, like, sort of, like, you know, do stuff with. So not bad. I would say it's a little bit weak compared to, like, you know, some of the other talents basically you can get, but, you know, for what it's basically offering here, it's not a bad talent. I never actually got on my reflex lake system, but, you know, for my basic reason, I'm bad talent for what I'm reading here, so I probably would rate that around B tier, maybe C tier. Yeah, maybe it's more like a C tier talent, but at the top of it. But, you know, it's basically one of those talents that, like, you know, it's basically good where it basically is. It could be a little bit better, perhaps, because there's basically other talents that, like, you know, basically surpass it. But, you know, it's not bad for what it basically offers. All right, well, I'm just going to take a drink here, so I'm just going to pause the recording. All right, well, let's continue on. So next one's going to be Crafty Hands and Dexterity Prodigies here, which basically lets you, like, you know, imbue gems into helms and belts. So for those who basically like to imbue gems in, like, their items, this is going to be pretty powerful, I guess. I don't really use, like, you know, imbue myself, though, so there is that to consider. So imbue items basically, like, you know, the, like, you know, second, like, you know, talent into, like, the Stone Alchemy tree here, or third maybe. I think it's, like, you know, the third. So basically you can imbue a body armor up to tier raw talent level with a gem, granting additional powers. And you can only imbue items basically once and it's permanent. So this is, like, a very neat idea to sort of, like, you know, boost up, like, your, like, you know, items to be a little bit better, but at the same time it's like, you know, the gems basically in this game are not really that powerful. And that's, like, the main drawback for, like, Crafty Hands. In many ways, like, you know, Crafty Hands is not really, like, you know, a prodigy that needs to be reworked, but whereas the gems need to be reworked a little bit better, because when you look at the gems here, for example, basically if you look at some of the tier 5, like, gems that are, like, you know, down here, they basically give you, like, you know, 6% stun, which would be, like, you know, alright, because you didn't have, like, you know, stun resist already on, like, most of your other gear. You have, like, +5 all stats, just, you know, Y botter. You have, like, you know, 10% all damage and 5% critical chance. That's not bad, but I mean, you're probably gonna find, like, a lot of, like, you know, other stuff basically, like, you know, you're basically gonna find, like, you know, with the gems, it's like, you know, you get little, like, you know, bits and pieces from it, but, you know, it doesn't really, like, you know, max to, like, some of your projects that, you know, might be, like, giving up for, like, you know, these little bonuses here. And, you know, it's not like a bad prodigy, but it's just one that, like, you know, could be buffed, like, by a lot, I think. So Crafty Hands is basically, like, you know, it's basically one of those, like, you know, is it F tier? Bottom of D tier? I'd say it's probably, like, the F tier, and it's not really, like, the prodigy's, like, fault, it's just, like, the fault of, like, the gems. Really, the thing about, like, Crafty Hands is, like, it's not a bad prodigy, it's the fact that gems are really bad. So gems really need to be improved on, like, their effects basically to, like, you know, really buff out, like, you know, Crafty Hands here to, like, you know, max your prodigies. But, you know, it needs a rework for sure, this one. So down to F tier basically goes. Alright, Flexible Combat, or FC. So this is basically another, like, you know, sort of free prerequisite you basically get, and it's basically another passive one as well, so it's basically always on. And what it basically does is it basically gives you a 50% chance to, like, do an armored strike on each melee attack. So I'll note basically as a sort of hot take, I really don't care much for Flexible Combat. The idea of, like, basically getting, like, an armored strike is, like, you know, not really appealing to me, but I mean, there is, like, some situations where it might be useful if you have, like, you know, a very good pair of gloves that, like, you know, has a very, like, interesting, like, sort of effect on them. Basically, the idea of, like, Flexible Combat is that for like, say, a brawler, you'll be able, like, to do, like, a lot more damage with your fists because, like, you know, you can, like, say a third attack with, like, your, like, you know, R2 fists. So pretty powerful. And then if you basically have, like, you know, a fairly good gloves and, say, like, you know, a berserker or, like, you know, some other, like, melee type of character like that, it's possible you might be able to get, like, you know, a nice little effect basically from your gloves, as well as the extra damage, of course, as well. But I find that with Flexible Combat, even though it adds, like, extra damage, it doesn't really add, like, any, like, really utility to, like, damage as well. So there's that to sort of consider. But I will not acknowledge it's a very powerful talent for sure. So Flexible Combat is basically one that, like, you know, it's definitely up to at least a B tier. And I probably, you know, rate it basically over. Whoops, I got the wrong thing here. I would probably rate over like the pain enhancement system for sure. So definitely a solid like B tier talent for like what does offer. It's just like I myself really don't care for it. All right, roll with it. So have it knocked back 50 times. That's very easy to get because you're probably gonna be knocked all over the place, but whatever. So this is basically our first sustained prodigy, and it basically resets it like for 10 turns whenever it's basically goes off. And what it basically does is it basically gives you a 10%, 50% physical resist, which is pretty powerful. Sort of. Sometimes you get hit by a lot of physical damage, so that can be helpful for it. Now the idea of roll with it is that basically when you're hit by melee or archery, you move back one tile and gain 2% movement speed for one turn. So that can basically mean you can be repositioned a little bit. You can basically get a better bit of physical resist. Now another roll with it is basically one of those talents that it is functional, but at the same time I figure it's basically outshone by say the automatic reflex system. And at the same time as well, the bonuses here aren't really that great compared to say free turn. So it definitely is one that needs to be reworked a little bit. So roll with it. Sorry, you're down in F tier, I think. Even below the gems for sure. So yeah. Swift Hands. All right, so I'll note that Swift Hands basically is another free prerequisite prodigy, and it basically has a cooldown of 3. And how this one basically works is that basically when we basically pick up this prodigy, it'll basically let you swap your weapons and your quick slot slots basically for free. So if you basically have say a curse for example, and you're basically running around with say a two-handed sword, and you basically come up to a situation where say you may prefer to have your shield or your dual weapons if you have your off hand, so to speak. Then you can basically quick swap pooch for free instead of functionally going into a turn basically to swap them out in your inventory. In many ways I find Swift Hands is it's useful I guess if you have that sort of situation basically happen, but not really. But where Swift Hands basically shines is really its secondary ability here. So basically lets you pair up the 4 tools, which can be used as you want and worn. So basically tools those are your totems, your wands and stuff like that. You basically have your pick and stuff like that. Those are your tools basically. And basically it can let you get these interesting little effects with it. I've heard people say Swift Hands is basically kind of strong if you have the equipment basically for it, but it basically requires you have to find the equipment basically, and it basically requires set basically as well. Not really a bad prodigy. It's just it's not really a whole lot of situation where swapping weapons is that useful, and then is there 4 tools that basically match up to say having something like say massive blow for example. This is to throw it out there. Swift Hands basically is one that I think it could be improved by a lot. So I'm really tempted to say it's another D tier sort of talent. I mean there is powerful items that you can basically use tool wise, but I just really don't like the fact that you have to do all this inventory management, and that's the main drawback against it, I think. Anyhow, on to the next one is Fruit of Crowd. So Fruit of Crowd is basically a prodigy that's for summoners and those who have lots of party members. It can be kind of useful if you can basically get it because it'll basically let you get a lot of interesting effects basically from it. So for example, when you basically have Fruit of Crowd basically on your sustain here, it'll basically let you never damage your allies or neutral creatures, and it'll basically apply to them as well through automatically granted to your friends. So basically that means if you have say a summoner and you have minions that basically damage each other as well as you, they won't actually damage you anymore, and actually use their abilities to their full effect basically to resolve that. So it's pretty nice. It also means say for the skeleton mage of the necromancer, it'll basically blast his arcane beams basically through you if it wants to, with no reprisal, so to speak. So pretty nice. It also gives you a global speed for each friendly creature in sight. So if you have say 5 friends, you basically get the 50%. That's pretty good. I mean that's basically compared to the automatic reflex system basically gives you a free turn, right? So that's basically giving you a guaranteed if after 5 turns, 75% movement basically running around doing whatever you want to, and it's global speed too, right? So you can basically attack, you can basically cast spells, do whatever you want to, and have 50%. It also gives you a bonus of like 10 to all saves per friendly creature in sight, so basically you can get like lots of saves. Now, where does like, this really shines though is like positioning basically. So another basically it says here is swaps places friendly creatures in 1/10 of a turn. Basically that means like, if you have like say like a movement infusion, that basically like, lets you move at like say like 1/10 of a turn. This is basically doing the same thing here, except you have to just like swap places with like your friends here, for example. If you have like a lot of friends on the board, it effectively means you basically can like, run away from stuff through your friends, so to speak, if you need to. And if you need to like reposition, you can do as well. So very, very powerful if you know how to use it basically. The only thing that's like bad about food cards is that basically requires you to be a summoner or like, have like that many people, but for what it basically offers, it's like, not bad. So it's a solid talent for sure. Easily like, your B or A tier. I say it's probably A tier. Just above flexible combat for sure. Or, well, you know what? Let's say B tier, but basically ahead of flexible combat because it is basically like, restricted to like only summoner type characters. So there's that basically going against it. Compared to say like, these two right here. I do have like my power base up here, and that's restricted to like, willpower type of characters. That's fine, let's throw it up here. Alright, so Vital Shot. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with Vital Shot. I basically hate it because I remember all those times in past versions where I fire a Vital Shot. Something pulls me in front of my own Vital Shot, and I kill by my own Vital Shot. But I love the fact that that's no longer the case, so yeah, Vital Shot is just a huge damage output if you basically land it on your like, hit on something. What Vital Shot basically does is it basically requires you to get like 50k damage with ranged weapons, and then much like say like the other like 10 turn cooldown like abilities, it basically has a 10 turn cooldown as well, and it'll basically deal 450% weapon damage, plus 5 turn stun and cripple, which are devastating basically to land on stuff for sure. Basically the thing about Vital Shot is basically it gives like rangers and side shots and stuff like that an extra damage boost if they basically don't have like the damage from like their other abilities. So for a side shot, that's basically devastating for like what they basically can do because they're not really an offensive oriented class. And then for like the archers and like the skirmishers and stuff like that, it basically helps them out as well because it gives them yet another like stun in days or stun and like the cripple effect basically work with. So yeah, very devastating for what it basically offers you, and nothing really let it down, so to speak. I say that's probably an easy like A tier talent. Is it better than Giant Leap though? That's the only question here. I really like Giant Leap because it also serves as like utility for like moving around. So I think I'll say Vital Shot's basically a little bit weaker, but not by much. All right, Windblade, and I'm just gonna throw this right out here from the start. S tier, easy S tier right there. All right, so Windblade. This is another one of our like active like attack talents. Now this one's got a 12 turn cooldown, but for what it basically offers, it's just awesome. So basically you have to deal 50k damage with dual weapons, and when you basically like use this ability, you'll deal 320% weapon damage to everything around you in a 4 turn like radius or 4 tile radius, and as well as like inflict a 4 turn disarm. Now I'll note that for some like characters like say like the Berserker or like well I guess not the Berserker, but maybe it's Berserker. Yeah, we'll say like even a Berserker. The thing I like about this like this ability Windblade. No, not Berserker. They're two-handed only. The thing about like this ability for like dual wielders is that like it basically gives them like a huge like damage output for like a race of 4. But on some like classes that basically lack like the AOE options, this basically lets them do a lot more as well as a result of it. So Windblade will actually like give you like a big like radius of like a damage, which some like melee classes basically lack in that sort of like area, and this basically lets you like really like do like the damage output against like little like minions and like mobs and stuff like that. They're like not really worth your time, but still like a threat nonetheless. So yeah, Windblade basically gives you like a good amount of damage for like all small fry basically in your like vicinity. Gives you a 4 turn disarm, which is also very nice, and there's just nothing really like to say that's bad about it. It's just awesome for like the characters that basically can use it. Rogues. That's who really benefits from this, I think. Rogues and Shadow Blades. Alright, so the final dexterity like prodigy here is Windtouched Speed. And this one is basically limited to like the anti-magic characters, but it's not bad for what it basically offers. So You need to get like 10 levels of equilibrium using talents. That means you have to basically like, invest in say, like the higher like talents basically from like the Samurai Queen or be a welder or something like that. But besides that little restriction, it's not that hard basically to get. Now, what this basically offers you is a guaranteed 20% global speed bonus and 10% cooldown reduction. And also like don't trigger pressure traps, which are like a sort of like carryover from like past versions, like relics basically of another time, so to speak. But whatever. The thing about like Windtouched Speed is it basically makes you a whole lot faster, and that's just good in all situations basically. Basically, this is like the automatic, up here. It's like the automatic reflex system, except like it's always basically on, and like besides the fact that you have basically like you get like 10 equivalent talents, it basically like really makes up for like what you basically do here for like the global speed. In many ways, this feels like a talent that's basically sort of like geared to sort of help out anti-magic characters, sort of like keep up with their arcane counterparts. Because I'll note that basically in this game, the anti-magic characters seem a little weaker compared to like the magic wielding ones for like what they basically do. So it basically helps out in that sort of area. In many ways, I like sort of wish this was like easier to get, but I understand basically where it basically is right now. So Windtouched Speed, it's another like A tier talent for sure. I feel for it right there because it's basically restricted to like a certain like type of like character in this game, sort of like the summoner, but gives you like good global speed, which is just nothing to be scoffed at for sure. All right, well I've been going on for like 36 minutes just for like the first like strength and like dexterity like prodigies here. I'll put a cut right here, and we'll basically continue this on with the next video. So this is it for like the strength and dexterity based like prodigies, and we'll see what goes on from here. So take care for now.